Parshas Chayei Sara, Tafshin Pei Beis. When we get to Parshas Chayei Sara every year, I think just how quickly we went from talking about that we're going to be introduced to the Avos and the Imois, and in this week's Parsha, already Sarah Imenu and then Abraham Avinu exit the stage until next year, Mirz Hashem, in the Parshiyos HaShavua. And you might think, you might say, so that's the way life goes. There's nobody around today who was around even 100 years ago. What you expect Abraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu to be around to always be around. But the truth of the matter is, as Yidden, we don't live that way. We look at our Avos and Imois as if they are here, as if they're alive, as if they're right in front of us. And the lessons that they teach us from their lives are lessons that we live over and over, and we study throughout our lifetime. We study every year when we get to the Parshiyos. And this week's Parsha, we need to sum up a bit about what was the life of Sarah Imenu, what was the life of Abraham Avinu, and how does it relate to us. The beginning of the Parsha, Vayihiyu Chayei Sara, Me'ah Shana V'Yesrim Shana V'Sheva Shanim, Shnei Chayei Sara. That Sarah lived 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. The obvious kasha, why do we say 120 and 7? Just say 127 years. So Rashi tells us, on the words of Shnei Chayei Sara, Rashi tells us that it's coming to teach us that all three stages of her life, when she was 100, when she was 20, when she was 7, Kulan Shavin L'Toiva, they were all equally good. The question is, what does equally good mean? So the Sefer Irin Kadishin brought down to the Nesivos Shalom, it's a Sefer from the Rishona, Zechus Yagan Aleinu, and he asks, if all the years of Sarah Imenu were equally good, why do we begin the Parsha by Vayihiyu Chayei Sara? We all know, Chazal tell us, the Gemara says, that any time you have the word Vayihiyu, or you have the word Vayihi, it tells you of a lashon of tsar, a lashon of pain, Vayiyu and Vayihi. So if all the years of Sarah's life were equally good, why do we begin the Parsha with Vayihiyu, the lashon of tsar? So too asks the Nesivos Shalom, it would seem that if you ask me, and you think about the Parshiyos that we've just learned over the past couple of weeks, it would seem like the life of Sarah was not a very good life at all. The life of Sarah, we would think, looking just in a plain view, the life of Sarah would seem was full of tzaros and pain. She didn't have children for so many years. Her son was taken, almost brought at the Akedah. Every time she went to Mitzrayim, she went to Avimelech, she had to hide, she was taken away. That doesn't seem like a very good life all around. So what does it mean? Kulan Shavin L'Toiva. They were all equally good. It doesn't seem like the life of Sarah was a very good life at all on the surface. Also, why do we mention Kulan Shavin L'Toiva only by Sarah? Why does Sarah stand out that we need to be told that the life of Sarah was good? It would seem like we would think, as we said before, that the life of Sarah maybe wasn't so good, but we're telling you, Kulan Shavin L'Torah, for some reason, we have to be told this by Sarah Imenu. Also here, in our Parsha, the Torah tells us about Abraham Avinu. The Abraham Zakein Ba Bayamim, Abraham was getting a bit older. Hashem Beirach Es Abraham Bakoil. Hashem blessed Abraham Avinu Bakoil with everything, a tremendous bracha, a great madrega of bracha. Imagine to be blessed by Koil with everything, and we only say this by Avraham Avinu. Why is this only by Avraham Avinu? Sarah has something special. Kulan shavin l'toiva. They're all equally good. Avraham Avinu has the huge bracha of Bakoil, being blessed on everything. Why? Why was Avraham different? Why was Sarah different? What makes them stand out? Nesivos Shalom says, the pasuk says in Tehillim Peites, Ki omarti oilam chesed yiboneh. The world, we are saying that the world is built on chesed. The foundation of the world is chesed. And all these parshias of the Torah that we just read, all these parshias about Avraham Avinu, they teach us that through the chesed of Avraham Avinu, we began the Olam HaTikun. We know Avraham Avinu, after the Doris of the Mabul, the Rafloga, and all those things, Avraham Avinu was the beginning of the Olam HaTikun. Avraham Avinu was the builder of the world. Comes the pasuk in Tehillim and tells us, Ki omarti olam chesed yiboneh. Avraham Avinu, with his chesed, with his midah of chesed, and we all know how important chesed is. We're sitting here in a building in Bikur Cholim of Lakewood, 24/7. Chesed, the world stands on chesed. The world is built on chesed. And the biggest part of the chesed, says in Nesivos Shalom, the biggest part of the chesed of Avraham Avinu was that it was constant and consistent. It wasn't just like he did a chesed here and he did a chesed there, he helped someone out there, he helped someone out in another place. No, the chesed of Avraham Avinu was like the chesed here in Bikur Cholim of Lakewood, as they say, 24/7. No break. That's what chesed has to be. Chesed kel kol hayoim. Another pasuk. Chesed is the entire day. The Kabrina, Zechusi Yogan Aleinu, says that a person needs to do chesed every day. And any day that a Jew does not do chesed for another Yid is not considered a day lived. An amazing statement from the Kabrina. Zechusi Yogan Aleinu, he says, if you don't do a chesed for somebody, if you don't do something for someone that day, it's as if you have not lived that day. And the Shla, at the end of Masechta Psachim, reiterates this point, and he adds, and this is something that's kedai to remember, he adds that the shefa from above, the shefa, bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, comes to people through midas HaChesed. So if you are a person, probably like everybody, you're a person that wants bracha in your life, make sure to at least do something small, a chesed, for someone each and every day. Whether it means you teach something to someone, you learn with someone, you do a good deed, you can just say a good word to somebody, help someone out. When you do a chesed for another person, the Nesivos Shalom tells us, you're zoicha to Hashem tzilcha. Hashem is like your shadow. Hashem sees what you do, and you get repaid back in kind. You do chesed for Hashem's people, you do chesed for Hashem's children, then Hashem does chesed for you. Hashem tzilcha, Hashem acts kaviyachol like your shadow. And it's for that reason that the Torah elaborates so much about the chesed of Avraham Avinu in these parshias. In last week's parsha, and in the tests that Avraham Avinu had to go through, and when Avraham sent Eliezer to search for a wife for Yitzchak, in this week's parsha, it was Davka with the midah of chesed. And we know, with Rivka being all chesed, and Yitzchak, who was the midah of Gevura, with that, Yaakov Avinu and the Shvatim, Yaakov Avinu, who was the midah of Tiferes, that combined the two, was able to give birth to and produce the entire Klal Yisrael. So Hashem set up the world that as human beings, we should have a drive, and we should have a want to do for other people. You ever notice that when a child is born, the mother has a natural inclination to want to feed the child. And you know that if for some reason the mother cannot nurse a child, the mother cannot feed a child, it's very painful. And that represents what the entire world is. The entire world tells us the nature of the world is that we should give. And a person, if you can't give, and if you're not able to give, if you don't, then it hurts. And it's supposed to hurt. And the Torah is telling us in our parsha about Sarah Imenu that Kulan Shavin L'Toiva, that Sarah Imenu, you might think that she lived a painful life, that she went through the years without children, and all the other things that we think Sarah went through. But Sarah was the partner in the chesed of Avraham Avinu. And that's what Toiva is. Good comes to this world through chesed. And although it might seem on the surface that the life of Sarah was full of tzaros, the Torah is telling us here that it was all worth it to bring chesed that the entire world stands on. That was the life of Sarah Imenu. Everything in her life that we think might have been a little hard, a little hurtful, tzaros in her life, because she was a pillar of chesed with Avraham Avinu, everything was turned into bracha. Kulan shavin l'toiva. And the Torah is teaching us that if you are oisik in chesed, then you will bring the chesed of Hashem on yourself. And just like Avraham Avinu and Sarah, the Torah tells us about Avraham Avinu, as we said, Avraham zokein bo bayomim, v'Hashem beirach es Avraham b'koil. HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed Avraham with everything. Why? Because he did chesed every day. Avraham Avinu was one who looked for chesed every day. And even on days that we would think maybe it was difficult after having a bris milah, after it was hot outside, Avraham Avinu still sat outside and he did chesed, and because of that he received the shleimus habracha, which was v'Hashem beirach es Avraham b'kol. And this is really a lesson we all have to remember. We all have to work into our system. And as I mentioned over here, it's an obvious thing. Everybody here, all the wonderful people in this room, the volunteers of Bikur Chaylim, all the people here understand very well what chesed is. But you know, sometimes the best speech is one that you give to people who actually understand what you're talking about. And everybody, the lesson that we need to learn is that we need to be focused on doing good to others. Because if we focus on doing good, saying a good word to someone else, make that phone call, do someone a favor, understand that you're living the life of Sarah Imenu and Avraham Avinu. And most of all, you need to understand that it turns around and it comes back to you. You're doing favors for other people, you're being nice to other people, but it turns around. V'Hashem beirachas Avraham b'koil. Why? Because of chesed. And Sarah Imenu, kulan shavim l'toiva, her life was considered equally good. She brought bracha into the world. Why? Because of chesed. That ultimately, if you do for other people, and the focus of your life is not so much on yourself, but your focus is looking outward. What can I do for someone else? Making sure not to hurt anybody else. Making sure that you don't say a bad word about anybody else. Making sure not only don't you say bad words, but you give a lot of good words. That's the best. There's nothing better for a person than a couple of good words. And we all know that there are people who could use it. Let's learn the lesson of Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu. Let us learn the lessons of chesed, so we should all be zoicha to bracha ourselves too.